Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of my podcast, Book and Story World with author Priya Grewal. So thank you to everyone who's previously listened and tuned into my podcast. Best wishes to everyone. So for today's episode, I thought I would read aloud one of my horror sci-fi books called Horror from Outer Space by myself, Priya Grewal. And the subtitle on the front cover is Be Careful Who You Let Into the House. Along with the rest of my books, Horror from Outer Space is available to purchase on Amazon in paperback or on Kindle, and along with the rest of my novels, it is self-published with Amazon KDP. Right, so let's get started. So my sci-fi horror novel, Horror from Outer Space by myself, Priya Grewal. Chapter 1. Shaka rode his bicycle to his house. He was currently 21 years old. It was nearing evening. As it was summer, the sky was still light. It was nearly 7 p.m. He lived in a town called Ealing in the west of London. He was currently unemployed. Along with most of his friends, he hadn't been able to find a job yet since finishing university. It was now the following June, almost a year since he had graduated. He was going to turn 22 in July. He had had fun signing on to job seekers allowance and hanging around with his friends for the year. Shako's parents had gone to the north of the country to Leeds for a distant relative's wedding for the weekend. Shako and his 17-year-old brother Vasek didn't want to attend as they found it too much effort for some relative they didn't know or recognize from any functions they had been to in the past. Shako was glad his parents didn't force them to go. It was now Friday and his parents had already departed for their weekend away. Shako put his bicycle into his garden, going through the gate that led into their back garden. He could see his younger brother Vasek through the patio doors. He had just finished his AS levels and was enjoying himself post-exams. Shako could see that he was playing on the PlayStation. He looked riveted by the game he was playing. Shako knocked on the patio door. Vasek glanced up, got up off the sofa and turned the patio door key to let his brother in. "Thanks," Shako said to his younger brother. "That's okay," Vasek replied, sitting back on the sofa and unpausing his game. Shako could see that Vasek was playing his new shooting game. Shako went into the kitchen to make himself a sandwich. "What have you been up to?" Shako asked Vasek from the kitchen as he prepared himself a sandwich. "Nothing," Vasek shouted back. "Just playing on the PlayStation and watching some TV." "What did you do today?" Vasek called out. "Nothing," Shako shouted back, spreading margarine onto his bread. "Just rode my bike to the park with the usual lot and hung around there for a while." "Okay," Vasek shouted back. The usual lot meant the 4 boys and a girl from school that Shako regularly met up with. He enjoyed their company, so liked them being his main friends in town to do activities with. Shako put a turkey slice into his sandwich with some salad and cut the sandwich in half. He poured himself a soft drink. He took his plate and drink into the living room, kicking the living room door open with his foot. "Have you eaten?" Shako asked Vasek. "Yeah," Vasek responded, eyes never leaving the screen as he shot at an enemy in the game. "I just had the leftover pasta from last night." "Okay, cool," Shako responded. Both brothers had straight black hair and deep blue eyes. They had got on very well since Vasek had turned 16 and got older, as opposed to squabbling more when Vasek was younger, usually over the remote. Vasek had been in a relationship with a girl called Marava for almost a year. He was saving up his lunch money to buy her a present for their 1-year anniversary. Shako smirked as he ate his sandwich, thinking back to his teenage years. The old days of having a girlfriend and saving up lunch money to buy presents for anniversaries, birthdays, and Valentine's Day. Shako was glad those days were over. He didn't have to put up with arguments anymore and enjoyed life being single after turning 20. He went on a couple of dates in his 2nd and 3rd year of university, but didn't like the girls' characters enough for anything more serious. "How's Marava?" Shako asked Vasek to make conversation. "Yeah, she's fine," Vasek responded. "I'll probably meet up with her tomorrow and catch up. I've saved up £40 now for an anniversary present." "What are you going to buy her?" Shako asked. Probably a necklace or bracelet. You can help me pick something if you want." "So I have a second opinion," Vasek exclaimed enthusiastically. Yeah, sure, Shako responded, finishing his sandwich and drink. He picked up his plate and glass and went into the kitchen to wash the dishes. Chapter 2. Shako and Vasek had begun watching a film called Last Action Hero on ITV. It was now 8:30 p.m. The film had been on for half an hour. The pair were having fun watching a movie with the lights off and eating junk food. All of a sudden, the film was interrupted. The TV screen turned into a blank red screen for a moment, and then a newsreader was on screen and it said "Breaking News" at the bottom of the screen. Shako and Vasek glanced at one another. "What the hell?" Vasek exclaimed. "I wonder what's going on," Shako responded, staring confused at the screen. The male newsreader looked gravely serious. "We are sorry to interrupt your viewing," the newsreader began, "but a serious incident is occurring in the north of the country in Manchester." Shako and Vasek glanced at one another in shock again. The TV switched to showing a scene around a shopping mall area. People were screaming. Vasek screamed out loud as the camera showed black, horrible creatures chasing the people around. Shako clung onto the blanket he had been relaxing in fear. He could now see the creatures in other colours too, red and green, with long, horrible yellow fangs and red eyes. They were terrifying. Vasek screamed again as one of the red monsters captured a person and ripped their head off in one motion. Then the camera showed another monster biting a person's head off. He then spat the head onto the ground. It was complete bloodshed. The people in the scene were running for their lives. All of a sudden, the camera fell to the ground sideways, and Shako and Vasek heard whoever had been holding the camera shout, "No, please." Shako lifted his hand to his mouth in shock and fear. The scene ended and the screen went red again. Vasek turned around to look at Shako, eyes hauntingly wide in fear. Chapter 3. The newsreader appeared on screen again. Shako and Vasek watched, riveted. "As you can see, these are extremely distressing scenes," the newsreader said. Shako and Vasek's mouths were open in horror. "Our advice is to stay indoors, lock all your windows and doors, close your curtains, and do not go outside," the newsreader advised. "The military and police are not currently getting involved due to the danger posed to themselves," the newsreader informed. The newsreader had turned pale and looked scared. "Good luck," he said to the nation. The screen went blank again. There was a brief beeping noise and the screen turned red again and said "No service" on it at the bottom of the screen. Shako was about to leap off the sofa to make sure all the doors were locked when a hideous, terrifying face appeared on screen. The monster was a dark green and grinned a hideous, long-toothed grin. The monsters, as shown before on the news, looked to be about 7 foot tall. "Hello," the monster spoke in a deep English accent. "Greetings to you all on planet Earth," the monster continued. "We're here to kill you all. Have a nice night." The monster erupted into terrifying laughter. This time, the TV switched itself off completely. Chapter 4. Shako shook himself out of his frozen terror. He had to look after himself and his little brother. He ran to the light and switched it on. "No," Vasek cried. "Keep the lights off." "Oh, yeah, sorry," Shako responded, realizing it was better to have the lights off, so the monsters didn't pay attention to their house if they managed to get to Ealing. Before Shako could turn the light off, the living room light flickered for a split second. Shako and Vasek stared at one another. Shako quickly turned off the light. He ran to the patio door, locked it, and drew the curtains. Shako ran to the front door and made sure it was locked from the inside. "I'm going to check the windows are shut and close all the curtains upstairs," Shako told Vasek. "I'll go with you," Vasek stated, not wanting to be left downstairs by himself. Shako and Vasek rushed upstairs. Shako went into every bedroom with Vasek following him, and Shako made sure every window was shut and drew all the curtains so no one could see in, as advised on the news. Shako and Vasek rushed downstairs again. "Let's get weapons," Vasek instructed Shako. "Good idea," Shako responded. Shako and Vasek went to the kitchen. Shako opened the kitchen drawer and withdrew 2 large kitchen knives. He gave one to Vasek. "What else?" Shako asked Vasek. "I'll get my baseball bat and the cricket bats, just in case, so we can hit them," Vasek exclaimed. Vazik ran to a cupboard in the living room and took out the bats. Okay, good work, Shako said to Vazik. Let's stay put in the living room, Shako instructed Vazik. The two brothers kept the knives in their hands and sat on the floor in the living room. I'm going to check to see if the TV is working now, Vazik said. Vazik got the remote and tried switching on the TV. Nothing happened. He took the TV plug out of the socket and put it back in. He tried switching on the TV with the remote. Vazik looked at Shako. Nothing, he said. Shako glanced at the TV and back to Vazik. Both stared at one another for a moment in silence. Ah, both brothers shouted simultaneously. They had both jumped in fear as the landline phone in the living room began to ring. Who could that be? Vazik murmured in fear. Shako looked worriedly at the phone as it continued to ring. What if it's one of them? Vazik asked, staring wide-eyed at Shako. Vazik looked petrified. The phone continued to ring. I'll get it, Shako stuttered in fear. Vazik swallowed as Shako, hand trembling, reached for the phone. Chapter 5. Hello, Shako stammered out. Vazik stared petrified at Shako. Shako, a familiar voice said down the phone. It's me, Waza. Waza? Shako asked, calming down a little. Yes, I'm with Keela, Waza informed Shako. Shako swallowed and sighed a breath of relief. It was just his two friends, Waza and Keela, whom he had met up with earlier on in the day. It's just Waza and Keela, Shako informed Vazik. Vazik nodded his head in relief and collapsed on the sofa. Can you believe this? Waza exclaimed down the phone. No, Shako said. It's so scary. Aren't your parents in the north? Waza asked Shako. Yeah, Shako trailed off. Have you heard from them? Waza asked. Shako felt worry rising in his throat. No, we haven't, Shako replied. Vazik glanced over for a moment. What if the monsters have already killed them? Waza commented. I'm sure they're fine, Shako responded, not wanting to think the worst. Waza responded. Aren't you scared? Shako asked Waza, who sounded oddly jolly considering the situation. Of course I am. Keela is just here with me, Waza informed Shako. I don't know where my parents are. It's just me in the house with Keela. Can we come over to yours? Waza asked Shako. Shako clutched the phone more tightly. Are you serious? Shako asked Waza. They said to stay indoors on the news, lock all your doors and windows and to close your curtains. Yeah, I know that, Waza commented back. But come on, we should be together, Waza continued. Our group of friends should be together during this. Have you called the others? Shako asked Waza. We can't get through to the others. Keela tried on her mobile while I called you. I can drive my car to yours with Keela, Waza suggested. At least we'll be together. Are you with Vazik? Asked Waza. Yes, I'm with Vazik. Well, it's up to you if you're willing to risk it. Call me when you're outside then. I'll quickly open the door for you both, Shako told Waza. Excellent, we'll be there as soon as we can, Waza responded. Waza hung up the phone. Shako put the phone down. Vazik looked at him questioningly. It was Waza. Him and Keela are on their way over, Shako told Vazik. Waza's house was a 10-minute drive from Shako's. Seriously? Vazik exclaimed. They're that stupid not staying indoors, Vazik said. Shako shrugged. Their funeral, Shako stated. Vazik fell silent, nodding his head to himself. They're going to call me when they're outside. I'll quickly open the door and let them in, Shako told Vazik. Vazik looked exasperatedly at Shako. It'll be fine, Shako reassured Vazik. It will only take a second to let them in. Fine, Vazik replied. Let's look out the window before they come in to make sure there's no monsters outside first, Vazik insisted. Okay, Shako agreed. There was a moment of silence. How do you think Mum and Dad are doing? Vazik whispered to Shako. Shako stared back at Vazik, not knowing how to respond. The feeling of dread about the monsters and concern for his parents consumed him. Chapter 6. Shall we call them? Vazik asked Shako. Okay, Shako said. I'll try on my mobile first, Vazik suggested, taking his mobile out of his pocket. He looked worriedly up at Shako. There's no reception, Vazik told Shako. I'll try on the landline, Shako reassured Vazik. Shako pulled his mobile out of his pocket and looked up his mum's number. Shako waited a moment for the dial tone. It went straight to his mum's voicemail. Went to her voicemail, Shako murmured to Vazik. Shako put the phone back on the receiver and looked up his dad's number on his mobile phone. He began dialing it on the landline phone. There was no dial tone again. Straight to voicemail, Shako told Vazik. Vazik looked worriedly back at him. Suddenly, the TV screen came back on. Shako and Vazik stared at the screen in horror. Shako put the phone down. The monster's voice was in the background of the footage playing. Just thought we'd show you what is going on in the place you call the Midlands here in England, the monster's voice gloated at them. Shako and Vazik watched, struck with terror as the monsters in different colours, some wearing red cloaks with a hood on, ripped the people in the footage to pieces. It became more horrifying when the monster started eating the body parts of the people that had ripped into pieces. Shako felt a tear of fear fall down his face. "We're all going to die," Vazik cried out. No, we won't," Shako insisted. "We can defend ourselves. We can rip them to pieces with our knives," Shako tried to sound confident for Vazik. Both brothers picked up their knives again. The footage continued. "How are they controlling the TV?" Vazik asked as the carnage continued. "They must have magical powers," Shako answered. "Powers?" Vazik responded. "Yes, like the aliens usually do in films. They have their gadgets in the movies, can only be explained by magic," Shako guessed. "What dimension or planet are these demons from?" Vazik cried again. "Outer space," Shako responded. "They're evil," Vazik cried. "Evil. No matter what they look like, where they're from, it doesn't mean they start killing and butchering everyone in our population," Vazik continued. Shako pondered this in silence. "You're right," Shako eventually responded. "They're evil. Evil monsters," Shako stated. "Who sent them here?" Vazik cried. "Why are they killing us?" Vazik cried again. "I don't know," Shako responded. He put the knife down for a moment and hugged his brother. Vazik cried briefly into Shako's shoulder. A moment later, he lifted his head up. The scene had changed on the TV again. The monster who did the speeches was back. "See you soon," the monster said, wiggling his fingers at the nation. The TV screen switched off by itself again. Chapter 7. A short while later, Shako and Vazik were sitting on the living room floor, still shocked by the footage and message left on the TV by the monster. As the silence continued and the two waited, there was a knock on the door. Vazik gasped and looked at Shako. Shako stared back at him. "Somebody's at the door," Vazik whispered. Shako swallowed and didn't move. Suddenly, Shako's mobile phone vibrated. He took his phone out of his pocket and stared at the screen. "It's just Wazza," Shako told Vazik, feeling relieved. Shako stood up to let them in. "Wait, answer it first," Vazik cried. Shako looked at his brother for a moment and then answered the phone. "It's me and Keela," Shako recognized Wazza's voice. "Let us in." "Just a moment," Shako responded, hanging up the phone. "Let's look out the window first," Vazik instructed. "They could have voice-altering technology." "Who could?" Shako asked, dumbfounded. "The monsters," Vazik cried back. "Oh," Shako responded. The two brothers edged over to the living room curtains and opened one of the curtains ever so slightly. Shako peeked through and saw Wazza and Keela standing on the porch. "It's them," Shako said gratefully. He ran to the front door. Vazik peeked through the curtain as Shako ran to the door. "Okay," Vazik cried out to Shako. Shako opened the door. Wazza grinned at him. "Honey, I'm home," Wazza exclaimed, spreading his arms and grinning. Keela stood behind Wazza, grinning too. "Hurry up, come on in," Shako urged the pair. Shako quickly ushered the two inside the house and quickly shut and bolted the lock on the door again. He turned to look at the other two. "How can you smile at a time like this?" Shako asked them, shocked. He still had his knife in his hand. Wazza smiled again. "Not used to all this drama and action," Wazza cried happily. "Yeah," Keela said, smiling too. Wazza glanced at Shako's knife. "What's that for?" Wazza asked Shako. "Killing the monsters, obviously," Shako replied exasperately. "Oh," Wazza responded, glancing at Keela. "Let's go into the living room," Shako ordered the pair. Wazza and Keela followed Shako into the living room. "Vazik!" Wazza cheered as he saw Vazik standing by the curtains in the living room. Thank the Lord it's just you two, Vazik sighed a sigh of relief. Charming, Keela responded. You know what I mean, Vazik said to Keela. Not sure if there's any Lord God out there now watching over us, Wazza remarked snidely. It's just a phrase I'm used to using, Vazik retorted. Wazza and Keela sat on the sofas in the living room. At least we're all together now, Wazza exclaimed, instead of you two and us two hiding in our houses parentless. Yeah, Keela agreed. Four's better than two. I suppose so, Shako said, still standing up, knife in hand. Vazik sat down on the floor, relaxing slightly, knife also in hand. Have you heard from your parents? Wazza asked. Their phones went straight to voicemail, Shako responded despondently. Eek, Wazza responded, grimacing. Shako relaxed, getting used to Wazza's usual demeanour again. Grab those 2 baseball bats if you want, Shako instructed the pair. For what? Keela responded gleefully. To defend yourselves in case the monsters get into the house, obviously, Shako replied, sitting down on the floor. Wazza glanced at Keela. Both fell into sinister laughter. Chapter 8. Wazza and Keela continued to laugh. What's so funny? Shako asked Wazza and Keela vehemently. You, Wazza responded through his laughter. Vazik glanced confusedly at Shako. Keela continued to laugh and laugh. Me? Shako retorted. Yeah, Wazza responded, falling silent for a moment. So trusting, Keela said slowly. The next moment, Shako and Vazik stared in horror as Wazza and Keela's skin began to ripple. Ah! Screamed Vazik as the 2 faces began to morph into something else. Shako's breath caught in his throat. He stared in horror as long fangs began to protrude from the 2 and their eyes turned red. A split second later and their faces had shifted into 2 of the horrific monsters Vazik and Shako had seen on the news. They were 2 of the species of the monsters in their living room. Shako edged towards Vazik, his knife in front of him. The monster who had been Wazza regarded Shako, smiling slightly. The monster who had been Keela grinned venomously, hissing slightly. Those can't hurt us, the monster who had been Wazza gloated. Neither can your bats, the monster told them. The monster who had been Keela began laughing slowly. The 2 monsters looked really full of themselves. Shako grabbed Vazik's hand. Where's the real Wazza and Keela? Shako asked the monsters slowly. The monster who had been Wazza clasped his hands together and said, Dead, of course. The monster who had been Keela laughed again. It sounded like she was a female monster, the one who had been Wazza a male. Both monsters rose into the air. They both floated an inch from the floor. As you're about to be, the female monster exclaimed gleefully. We stole their memories, the male monster informed the 2 brothers, and thought we'd pay you both a visit and have some fun. Shako fell silent for a moment. He tugged Vazik's arms, eyes not leaving the monsters. Run, he whispered to Vazik. Chapter 9. Shako let go of Vazik's hand and ran past the monsters to the kitchen. Vazik followed him. They ran through to the corridor where the stairs were. Hurry, Shako whispered to Vazik. Both brothers bolted up the stairs as fast as they could. Shh, Shako whispered when they got to the top of the stairs. He quickly snuck into the bathroom, Vazik following him. Shako locked the bathroom door. He turned out the light. Let's stand away from the door, Vazik whispered. Both brothers backed away from the door. They stood staring at the white door in silence. Ready or not, here we come, they heard the monster shout from downstairs. Both brothers still had their knives in their hands. They heard the stairs creak as the monsters made their way upstairs. You cannot hide from us, they heard the female monster squeal in delight. The floorboards creaked as they heard the monsters move around. It sounded like they were checking the bedrooms. Think you're clever, do you? The brothers heard the male monster say. The monster sounded a little irritated. It sounded like the monsters were wrecking the bedrooms trying to look for them. Shako clutched onto Vazik's hand, terrified. They heard the monster stop for a moment. Had the monster spotted the bathroom door? The brothers heard the floorboards creak again. Next, they saw the door handle of the bathroom door move downwards. The monster moved the door handle up and down as the door didn't open. "That won't keep us out," the female monster screeched again. Vazik gasped as one of the monsters began clawing their way through the door. Vazik screamed as the monster damaged the door, his claw tearing away at the door. The next moment, the brothers could see one red eye of the monster staring in at them through the hole in the door. "Daddy's home," the male monster roared. Shako quickly looked at Vazik. "When they get in, throw your knife at one of their faces. I'll throw it at the other one. Use the moment of distraction to run downstairs and out of the front door," Shako instructed Vazik. Vazik looked back at Shako, wide-eyed, tears forming. He nodded his head. "I love you," Vazik whispered to Shako. "I love you too," Shako responded, hoping these weren't both of their last moments on planet Earth alive. The monster clawed most of the bathroom door away and reached his claw in through the gap made and slowly unlocked the door. Chapter 10. The monster fully unlocked the bathroom door. He swung the door open. He grinned a wide-toothed grin at the brothers. He entered through the door, the female monster following him. "Now!" Shako shouted. Vazik ran first and threw his knife at the male monster in front. Shako followed right after and threw his knife at the female monster. "Ah!" the male monster shouted as the knife hit his face. The female monster roared as the knife hit her face. Vazik and Shako sped past both monsters and hurried down the stairs. Vazik unlocked the bolt on the front door and ran outside. Shako followed him. They both stood on the front lawn. "Now what?" Vazik asked in a panic. "Run," Shako replied, petrified, not knowing what else to do. Vazik and Shako ran off their front lawn and began running down the pavement. They ran for what felt like a split second. A moment later, Shako felt a claw brush across his neck. He screamed as the monster caught him by the scruff of his t-shirt and turned him around. The female monster had captured Vazik and turned him around to face her too. The monsters had silently caught up to them both. The monsters towered over them, the night sky behind them. Shako and Vazik could not help but scream out loud at the monsters' terrifying faces this close up. "Your time is up," the monster holding Shako said in a quiet, evil voice. "Time to die," the female monster said, cackling. Both monsters opened their mouth wide and their fangs grew even longer. The monsters lifted the two brothers into the air, preparing to eat them both. Chapter 11. "Let go of our children," the brothers heard a voice say as the monsters lifted them both higher into the air. "What?" the male monster said in surprise, pausing. "Ah!" they heard both monsters shout out in surprise. Both monsters dropped the two brothers. Shako and Vazik fell to the ground. "Move back, boys!" The brothers recognized the voice of their father. Shako lifted himself off the ground, as did Vazik. They walked backwards, looking behind the monsters to see their mum and dad both pouring petrol onto both the monsters. "Back, boys!" their dad shouted again. Vazik and Shako ran further away from the monsters. A moment later, they saw their mum and dad both strike a lighter each and throw them at the two monsters. Their mum and dad quickly ran over to the boys as the monsters caught on fire. Both monsters screamed and screamed. Shako's mum put her arm around Shako and Shako's dad put his arm around Vazik. They watched together further down the pavement as the two monsters burned. The evil monsters screamed and screamed in anguish. Shako watched in awe as the monsters began disintegrating in front of them. Shako's mum and dad clutched onto their sons tightly. The monsters began crumbling into nothing. Shako watched as their red eyes melted into nothing. The fires died out with the monsters. Nothing was left on the ground but a pile of ash. Shako leaned his head against his mum. The evil monsters were dead. Chapter 12. Shako's mum and dad hurried the two brothers back inside of the house. Shako's mum quickly slammed the door shut and bolted the door again. "There might still be more out there," she exclaimed. When the door was locked, Shako's mum and dad hugged both of their sons and kissed them on the forehead. "How did you get here so fast?" Shako asked his parents in surprise. "I thought we were goners," Shako exclaimed, still reeling from the attack and his near-death experience. I know, Vazik murmured. The news got to us a little earlier as we were in the north, so it was on the local news there, and some of the other guests came into the party and told us, Shako's mum, called Marla, explained. We tried to call you straight away, but they had already cut off the reception and phone networks, Shako's dad, Nalid, explained. Your dad and I got straight into the car and began heading right back to you, Marla explained to both her sons. The motorway was virtually empty, Nalid explained to his sons. Everyone must have begun hiding in their houses, Marla added in. I had 4 cans of petrol in the boot of the car and a few lighters, Nalid continued. Your mum and I agreed to try and set the monsters on fire if we came across any, Nalid explained. We didn't hit any trouble until we were nearby, Marla continued. As we got off the motorway and drove down the neighbourhood roads, a monster stood grinning in the middle of the road in front of the car, blocking our way, Marla continued. Your dad tried driving into the monster, but nothing happened. The monster didn't move. The car just stopped in its place, motor running, Marla continued. The monster started laughing its horrible laugh, Nalid told his sons. Both of their parents' eyes displayed fear. So, we ran to the boot of the car, got 2 cans of petrol and 2 lighters, poured them both on the monster, and threw the lit lighters on it, Marla told her sons. We didn't know if it would work or not, but thankfully the monster started disintegrating and died in front of us both, Nalid finished telling his sons. Then, we got back into the car, drove back here as fast as we could, and saw you running down the pavement. The 2 monsters following you, Marla told her sons, hugging them both again. And we killed them, thankfully, Nalid finished. Shaka and Vazik stared at their parents. Thank you for saving us, Vazik said to his mum and dad. Yes, thank you, Shaka said, sighing a sigh of relief. Marla and Nalid grabbed both their sons and hugged them tightly again. It's not over yet, Nalid said a moment later. Let's stay indoors and hope for the best, Nalid instructed his family. Chapter 13. Shaka and Vazik sat for the next few hours in the living room with both of their parents. Their parents still had 2 cans of petrol left with them and more lighters. The cans and lighters were also in the living room with the family. They kept the curtains closed and lights turned off. Hours went by in silence, the family only whispering to one another here and there. Nobody came to the door again. The family couldn't hear any sounds from outside. Suddenly, as it neared 2 a.m., the TV came back on, plug still in the socket. The face of the newsreader who read out the initial report was back. He had survived so far. The family's breath hitched in their throats, waiting for the newsreader to speak. It's good news, the newsreader told whatever was left of the nation. The military discovered that fire killed the monsters. They lit the monsters aflame from helicopters. All of them are now dead, the newsreader told the nation. Shako, Vazik, their mum Marla and dad Nalid all stood up and started cheering. They jumped up and down cheering. It seems that a lot of parents in the country discovered that fire killed the monsters, so thank you to all of them for helping to save our nation, the newsreader told them all. Shako, Vazik, Marla and Nalid all hugged each other in celebration. The nightmare was over. Chapter 14. A month had passed since the attack. The country was still reeling from the existence of monsters and the attack, but were also recovering from the night of horror. People healed from the fear with their families. The military was working with what technology there was to try and discover what threats lay out there in the obviously now vast universe. No one knew how many other demons and monsters were out there in other galaxies and dimensions, in other solar systems. There had been many killings on the night, but the majority of the country had survived. The news reported that the monsters had landed in other parts of the world, but had eventually been killed once the knowledge of using fire to kill them was spread. Shaka and Vazik sat in their garden with their parents enjoying the warm weather. It had turned out that Waza and Keela were alive and had been hiding in Waza's attic. The monsters had lied to the brothers. It looked as if the monsters could look into memories without killing people. They had turned up on Shaka and Vazik's road and looked into their friends' minds to see what they could work with. Shaka's group of friends had survived. All of them were still in shock about the truth of the universe. They were evil, Vazik said again as his family sat out in the garden. Don't get confused with action alien movies. They're a species and they're evil, killing mercilessly, Vazik said. You're right, son, Nalid agreed. At least we know how to defeat them if any monsters ever return. I doubt the same species will try again as they got exterminated here, Marla said. Well, we know what to do if any do return, Nalid said. Nalid and Marla had stocked their garage full of stacks of cans of petrol and purchased many lighters. Yeah, Shako agreed. At least we're all together still, Shako said. We all survived. We all still have each other. Our family is still complete, Shako said gratefully. Marla, Nalid and Vasek all agreed. The family continued to relax together and enjoy each other's company in their garden, hoping that the horrors from outer space never returned. The end. Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed my sci-fi horror novel, Horror from Outer Space. And as mentioned, it's available on Amazon for purchase in paperback or on Kindle. So thank you so much, everyone who's tuned in. That concludes season 2, episode 6 of Book and Story World with author Priya Grewal. Have a fabulous week, everyone. Take care. God bless.